Baldur's Gate 3 just got its last major update for 2023. We also have some weird references to go over, as well as some today I learned mechanics that you might not know about, and even some odd things happening on the database. We got a ton to talk about. What's up, world? Should be back in video checking out all things BG3. Okay, so let's just jump right into the actual hotfix stuff going on there with that. Now, as always, a lot of these hotfixes and patch notes always have an opening statement, and Larian is no exception to that. Now, their opening statement is quite long. I'm going to try to summarize most of it, but the beginning part here is we have a new hotfix for you this week, addressing a number of crashes, blockers, and gameplay issues. Now, the hotfix is mainly addressing the issues with saves if you had mods loaded or they were changed. That's a big one there. They're very supportive of the mod community. And we actually have a big one here. So there was a bunch of complaints about the localization in some of the places that didn't have localization yet. However, we have confirmation from both this patch notes as well as a few other things, which also includes right here saying that Japanese is now available on PC, on Steam, and in PS5 in Japan only. They're obviously going to continue to work to bring it to other platforms, which of course they mean the Xbox Series S and X. And another cool tidbit here about that is Hideo Kojima actually tweeted saying that he received the very popular Baldur's Gate 3 Japanese version, which of course was the big hint there, and then the hotfix dropped right after that. Really cool to see someone like Hideo Kojima go ahead and jump into Baldur's Gate 3. I hope he really enjoys it. Honestly, the more game developers that play this game and use it for not only its recognition, but its actual gameplay mechanics, its story, lore, and just kind of how enriched BG3 is, I really hope more developers actually do play this game so they can see how a real video game is meant to be made. Now, in the Japan version, it does seem like they've had to add some more armor and some more clothing to some of the characters, but basically due to the CERO's classification requirements, characters cannot be fully exposed. At this bottom portion here, I'm going to kind of try to blur most of this out because it's just a little much at the moment. However, there is a little leaf where it does need to be placed, so they'll have some sort of thing covering those vital parts. Now, as far as the crashes and blockers go, there is a ton here. I'll try to summarize most of this and condense it down as it's not totally needed for everything here. There was several crash fixes on Xbox that they fixed, which were potentially related to either checking if the game had deluxe edition or when it was losing connection to the internet while editing the lobby name. They also fixed a kind of major crash here when swapping to honor mode. The game could actually crash, so that's been fixed there. And also when changing levels, so if you were updating the levels of your characters and putting in skill points, it might have caused a crash. And they even fixed this major one, which is not being able to load a save game that was started with a mod that's now missing. Honestly, some really great mod support here with this game, so I'm glad they're fixing those issues that do arise. Most of the other crash fixes have to do with save game or some player physics, so hopefully any of those issues have been fixed there. And this one, which is kind of funny, that when you disarmed an NPC twice during combat and made them drop two different weapons because they were dual wielding, incapacitated them, ended the combat without downing them, and then incapacitated condition would get removed, that unique set of variables and circumstances would actually cause a crash. Kind of incredible that they've been able to pinpoint this stuff down with doing all these different things and that causing a crash. Now, multiplayer actually did get some fixes, which do include the Traveler's Chest sometimes disappearing when changing to and from honor mode. That happened within the multiplayer setting, so a lot of honor mode fixes here. There was a kind of unique one here where if you joined a multiplayer session, if the host was controlling a companion and a split screen client joined the game, the client would gain control of the host avatar, which you definitely don't want just someone randomly joining in and having access to character. Another big one here for spellcasters, they fixed player 2 not being able to prepare spells if player 1 moves their focus during split screen game. Definitely a major issue for the healers and spellcasters there, not being able to prepare spells or swap those out. It's kind of a major issue. Now, for flow and gameplay, I'm always going to try to avoid this stuff because there's a lot of spoiler territory and we don't know how far along anyone is a game itself. However, for the most part, I'm going to generalize some as well as just kind of outline some of the ones that are generalized, like this first one that addressed an issue that prevented you from talking to NPCs at camp when going to camp via a long rest button, which again applies to everybody. Everybody knows about the camp, and yeah, not being able to talk to those NPCs and interact for those cutscenes that are kind of major and you need to kind of access that before certain points and acts, definitely a major issue there that was fixed. This is also a major one that people were complaining about as a recently fixed companions not being able to jump when following the player character. character, so you shouldn't need to manually jump them across or do any of that nonsense anymore. There was also some wrong character behaviors that were introduced in patch 4, so I do wonder what some of those are. Having played the original release through all the way through, and now with all these patches kind of stacking on top of each other, I can't wait to actually go back to the game and play like an entirely different game, it seems, at this point, which I think is really cool that Larian actually does do all this updating and changes and kind of reworks the game. Makes it seem like I have a whole entirely different game to play once I do end up coming back and playing entire again. Now, a ton of the other stuff is focused on actual questing things or kind of mechanics within that, but there should be some fixes there for player factions, as well as some other quest lines in Act 1. Now, another big thing for localization is that the Korean language pack is now enabled on Mac. Seems like there might have been some issue there with Mac itself. I'm actually surprised that this game is on Mac. I think even Diablo 4 isn't on Mac. There's a lot of games that don't come on Mac anymore because they just make up a small percentage of gamers. So it is good to know that they are getting that polish there over on Mac, and they even have the delay. They went over also that they fixed some weird texturing, some weapon textures that were giving some issues, and they fixed equipment tooltips opened via inventory, sometimes randomly closed controller without player input. There was also a dubbed character that got some fixes there, so if there's any issue you have with any of the characters that didn't have your localization, that should fix. Now, some other weird things to go over, especially with the Steam database and kind of the game in general. Jumping into the actual database stuff, if we look over, there's some weird stuff called Gustav content. Now, I can only find so many references to this, so if someone can help me out down below with different things, there's different mods that were called this, as well as something called Gustav mismatch that happened during multiplayer. This might just be kind of like their naming scheme for different package uploads. However, it does seem a little odd. I mean, this is the first time I've seen this on the database. However, I haven't checked it as frequent and other stuff, which kind of leads into some people were thinking that this is probably the last patch of 2023. People were kind of worried that there wouldn't be a Christmas hotfix or a Christmas patch. There's some other comments here saying that the patch 6 might actually come out before December, or it's going to come out late December. And if we compare some numbers from some previous patches, hotfix 11 came out on November 17th, while patch 5 came out on November 30th. And so if you do correlate those numbers together, 13 days is kind of over, obviously, what we have left of December. And with what I hope that the studio does take a holiday break, it does seem like that's less likely to be the case. Maybe we see something early in January, or maybe they just upload something on Christmas or something on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. It would be kind of cool to see some content together for that. However, this is a single player game. We do have to remind ourselves of that, and it's not exactly a multiplayer game where they have those holiday events. And Larian's already been insanely supportive of this single player game, so it does beg the question. It could be a possibility of them adding event stuff for actual Christmas and the holiday season. A late minute mentionable here is that if you are a wizard, you're able to unlock pretty much any door, even though it does say common locks. You can unlock most doors. So if you see a door that has maybe something tied to it and you don't really want to do it, you can just unlock with Wizard's Knock ability. Being a wizard, I actually found that out kind of early on, and so yeah, if you didn't know that, that is a good little tip there. All in all, that should about cover for today's video. If you'd like and subscribe, and to the next one. Deuces.